I've continued with the same interaction. I've expanded that because I've expanded my garden, so I've got more things growing. Um, Last year I focused on the cherries, and again this year I engaged with the cherries and protected the cherries while the blossom was on, and we had a huge crop of cherries. I left more cherries this year for the blackbirds, because we couldn't eat that many. So I left quite a few on the tree, and they feasted on them. I then focused on the apple trees. Last year we didn't have such a great crop of apples, and I think we've got 5 or 6 apple trees, and so I focused on them this year. Now we have so many apples, the actual branches started to bow down, and so I had to stake up the branches to hold up all the fruit because they were just too heavy for the branches on the younger trees. Yeah, the bigger trees and the sort of the larger trees, obviously they can take it, but some of the smaller trees that we put in the last few years, they started to weigh down under the level of fruit. The same with plums. We planted some plum trees, and again we had a good fruit. But this year we didn't want to strain the tree, so sometimes again we left some of the fruit on it, and some of the fruit the birds ate it and stuff. But we've got lots of things growing. So I have lots of tomatoes, or tomatoes as you call them, this year, and planted 6 different varieties to see which ones we would like, and they're all flourishing, full of things. And there's a sense of gratitude with creation for its bounty. And then I also want to be thankful for creation itself providing. So years ago I would have not, weeds in the garden, we don't want weeds in the garden, and all of that. So you pull up all the weeds before they get too big. But actually I thought, no, the weeds are the garden's productivity to provide compost. So the more I let the weeds grow in certain places, the more I can harvest, put in the compost bins, and then get more compost. So the weeds are actually the garden providing a source of nitrogen for the compost. And so I encouraged that this year. Right down the bottom of the garden, I let the bottom of the garden just be overgrown with weeds for a couple of months. And when they were about 5 or 6 feet high, I just went and pulled them all up, having let them seed, because then I'll get a whole load for next year as well. And so I got loads of compost for the compost bins. And I see it as a way that we're cooperating together. Last year, this plant appeared in the garden from nowhere. I didn't plant it, and it started quite a big plant, and it really grew. I mean, and then it started to have some purple flowers, and I thought, oh, it's quite a nice plant. What is it? And then I found it was comfrey. Now, comfrey provides fertilizer when you rot it down in water. So I discovered I could get all my tomato fertilizer and plant fertilizer out of the comfrey that the garden had just produced. And so I had 12 bottles of 4 liters of stuff, which you dilute 1 in 10. So I had loads and loads of fertilizer out of this comfrey. So then I thought, okay, I'll transplant it into various parts of the garden, parts I don't use for anything else, on the banks at the bottom of the garden. And now I've got loads and loads of comfrey plants down there. I've already started the first batch of fertilizer for this year, and I'm still using last year's. I've got plenty left that we can feed the plants with. So the garden provided, but my attitude towards that is thanksgiving. I rejoice in what creation has provided, and I engage with creation in a way which is very different from what I would have used to have done. Now last year we had a big oak tree, and we had a lot of what we call galls, which are where sort of wasps or something infect the tree, and then it produces this hard shell around it, and then they all fall off. And last year I sort of swept them all up and put them in the compost, as sort of brown material for the compost. But I thought, okay, that can't be doing the tree any good. So I thought, no, I don't want that this year. So I began to think about, how can I protect the tree from wasp attack? And we haven't had any this year at all, which is great. You know, and it is part of, I think, working together, looking for a sort of symbiotic relationship. But when you do deal with trees and things like that, do it in a sympathetic way. So, you know, I've had to do some pruning and cutting off some branches which are getting into power lines and all that sort of stuff. But I did it sympathetically and engaged the tree in that, look, I'm not here to hurt. I'm going to cut these branches off, but it's going to give you the ability to spread further this way. But this is not the best way of doing it. But it's always this sort of communication that I feel is part of, you know, that type of relationship that you can have. Now, there are some difficult things when you're trying to grow things and there are loads of slugs that eat things. But you have to have a balance. You know, it's like, okay, I thought, you know, I only use slug pellets because slug pellets can be damaging to wildlife and things. So I thought, okay, what are the natural ways of dealing with this? Because slugs are also food for frogs and snowworms, and so we had a nice grass snake come into the garden and things this year, and they're food. So you don't want to get rid of a whole food source, because then some animals might not survive. So I thought, okay, how do I manage it? And so I did some research and found that there are some things called nematodes that live in the soil that attack slugs and stop slugs eating, but don't harm the slug in a way that anything eats it gets harmed. So the slug eventually dies because it's not eating anything. But there's not enough in the soil to contain a lot of slugs, but you can develop your own. So I made slug soup. So I collected about 100 slugs of all sorts of varieties, put them in a tub with some green and about an inch of water, and a percentage of those slugs will have nematodes in them. And so you then allow them to infect all the other slugs and fill the water with nematodes. So then you can then pour off the water, dilute it, and tip it on your garden where you want it to stop slugs infecting all your plants and eating all your plants. So I didn't do it quite early enough this year, but now I've got the technique. Next year, you know, before I plant anything, I will have harvested a whole load of things for producing, you know, a natural way of controlling the slug population. You know, and then as they slow down the slugs eating, then the slugs don't reproduce as much, so there are less of them. And you sort of have a natural way of it sort of producing that. You know, and there are other things, you know, I tried brambles and all sorts of stuff, putting it around there, trying to stop the slugs crawling over sticky things. But, you know, they're not the nicest of things, slugs. So, you know, but next year I'm you know, think we'll be able to manage it better and where we're growing things. Last year didn't really have a good crop of lettuce and salad crops. So I focused on that this year, and this year we've been absolutely inundated with it. Everything grew. We had loads and loads of salad crops. Now, I don't really eat salad much, to be honest. You know, it's like I like greens, but you know, Debbie has salad all the time with her stuff. So she was harvesting salad every day. And we still got a whole load growing. And now I've grown succession planting. So there's another lot growing, and I've just loaded some more seeds, which will come up in a couple of weeks for the next lot. So it's going good. But I'm thankful for it. You know, it's a rejoicing in it, and a sense where creation was designed to work together with us. That it is joyful in providing for us. You know, there's a sense where you feel that relationship, and it's great. You know, it's really good. And this year, you know, we didn't cut the grass in May, and we let all the wildflowers come up. And then in June, I cut some circles, paths around all the wildflowers. So I left them for another couple of months until they'd finished, and then harvest it. And then all that went into the compost. And now the lawn's sort of, well, I wouldn't call it a lawn. It's grass, and various other green things. But now that's all basically sort of, again, growing nicely, but has contributed to the garden in itself. And then the birds, and they go and eat the seeds and all of that. So you get a lot of them. And I grow things for the birds. I like birds. We use a lot of seed. I grow sunflowers, so the sunflowers then produce sunflower seeds, and I use them to feed the birds in the winter and keep the heads, and then harvest all the seeds and keep some of them back to grow next year, which is what I've done. We have a sunflower growing competition to see who can grow the highest sunflower, which I came second in last year. I can't say I put that much effort into it, but this year I thought, oh, well, I'll put it in a bigger pot and whatever. So it's still growing. I'm up to about 12 feet high at the moment. So it's still going. You know, so yeah, I enjoy gardening. I enjoy just the things. I've cleared a few areas and put some, you know, grew some flowers and put some perennials in that will come back year after year. Just tidying it up and making it look nice, but keeping areas which are wild and lots of wildlife can live in and be safe in that sort of way. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.